Welcome to Let's Talk BD podcast, powered by the BD School.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of Let's Talk BD podcast. Today with me there is Jonathan Greaves from Agrea CS. Hi Jonathan, how are you today?
Hi Lucia, it's great to be with you today. So I'm speaking to you live from London, and we're really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Awesome, very good. So actually, Jonathan is an expert of customer success, and that's really what we want to talk about today, really the intersection between business development and customer success, and of course, learn a little bit more about this word and what we can take from it and what we can copy in business development. So I would say probably just maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your company, what you do, and then we take it from there.
Absolutely, yes. So Agrea was recently founded off the back of my experience as a customer success manager and customer success director over the last 10 years or so. And we were speaking previously about how there's actually quite a similar kind of origins in terms of our two companies, in that you recognize that within BD, there is sometimes a disconnect between what BD actually is and how it is actually applied. And I think more so, I think it in particular with the case of startups. And I found in particular with customer success, there is such a broad definition of ways that customer success can be interpreted. Sometimes I've heard people say it's about keeping customers happy. Sometimes I've heard that it's about generating new revenue. Sometimes it's about supporting customers as well. So lots of buzzwords that are kind of applied to customer success, which I think we'll touch on, as it were. So one of the things that I sought to do with Agrea is to try and have a recognized framework in which customer success can operate, but also understanding that customer success is not just within the gift of the businesses and the customers that use customer success, but also the wider frameworks as well and wider networks that touch this as well. So it's very important to understand how these interconnected players work together. So that's the premise of Agrea. And we do this through consultancy, alignment, and trainings providing services as well.
Oh, that's very good. Actually, you mentioned something that kind of triggered me, which is, how people consider customer success. Maybe I think sometimes to be more customer service, or sometimes, there is a bit of confusion around that. And I know that for me, when it comes to business development, there is one thing that really annoys me, which is when people say that business development is basically just sales and it's just a glorified term for sales. Is there something like this for you in customer success that, also like annoys you so much? You're like, no, it's not this one. Stop saying that. If yes, what is it?
Yes, absolutely. I think the thing I mentioned as well, I talked about the definitions that I've heard said to me about how customer success is about making customers happy, or it's about finding new revenue, or delivering value. Lots of different buzzwords around that. And the research that I did around this as well, and I think that you might have also seen as well, is that a lot of this, I think, stems from the business environments that have evolved over time. Back in, say, like the 1950s or 60s, as it were, we lived in a very much a transactional era, as it were, in terms of business relationships, where the three core players were the customer, the sales, and the support, sometimes interconnected, but not so much. But what we've seen over these periods is the shift to more customer-centric models, where the customers are more empowered with their solutions or with their services. So how do you make that connection as well? So I think what's generally happened over time, in summary, is you've got these functions, business development, and you've also got customer success, that have almost been overlaid in between these to try and bridge the gap between sales, support, and the customer. But then this obviously is then evolving even further, particularly with the advances in technology and AI, automating a lot of the processes that we would typically be responsible for. And so I think it's very much a product of our environment that actually we almost have had to put these roles in, but without actually having a universal definition of those as well. So that's, I think, where it comes from. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Totally. And actually, because I remember the first time I heard about customer success, I was working for a SaaS company, and it was really a new job title. It didn't really exist before. And I'm talking more or less about 2018, 2017, 2018. So it was really something new. And we just started it. I remember my friend Simone became our first customer success manager, whereas before she was in customer support. So we were kind of navigating a little bit the differences between the two. Can you tell us a little bit more about really what is customer success in essence, and then how it is different from customer service?
Yes, absolutely. So, in many ways, if we talk about the difference first between service and success, what we typically define as customer support or customer service is very much a reactive process whereby something happens and then gathering the evidence and the information about what's happened, be it a service request or an issue, then this is then investigated retrospectively and in reaction to that point. What the knock-on effects typically and traditionally used to be of that is that if the customer was not supported in a certain way, then there would be an increased chance that they would just take their business elsewhere. So what customer success, I think, tries to do in that regard is to be proactive about that and remove that and lower that risk of customers moving their business elsewhere. But moreover, as well, it's about delivering direct and visible benefits to that customers, which they can see a tangible value from as well. So if it's a let's say it's a SaaS company, the implementation of that software could be the direct benefit could be a reduced in cost to that particular department. It could be much more efficient processes that previously would be much more manual as well. So really, customer success in that sense is about delivering direct and visible benefits to that particular business unit that has bought the product, service, or offering that they have acquired there.
Right. So it's really more about, let's say, the proactivity, right, that customer success people have versus customer support. And like, how would the typical day look like for someone working in customer success? So if you have to be proactive and so on, like, how do you choose which customers you should talk to? How to prioritize them? And really what it is that you do with these customers as well?
That's a very good question, actually. I think actually that boils down to one of the key words and why there's a distinction, I think, between customer success and other roles is it's a strategic role. And ultimately, it's about being able to look at your set list of customers, as is typically the way the customer success organizations are looked at, and run them almost like your own miniature business, as it were, and looking at the list of customers and understanding, okay, if I were to be able to show the value to this high value customer over a period of time, would they have a higher chance of renewing for 2 to 3 years of business, or would there be more chance of me building a higher use case with a smaller player in my field to try and elevate them and grow them, as it were? So in many ways, there's almost a crossover, I guess, between the definitions, if you like, in terms of what a customer success will do, to where a business development person will take tasks and processes to develop and implement growth opportunities in a more sustainable way. So this is very much there's almost like a, if you like, crossover, almost like a bit of a twinning, as it were, between the two functions, as it were. So what's very interesting, I think, in telling about that is that, and I talked about this segmentation between transactional models and more integrated models, is why do we silo those two as distinct as well? Is there crossover, and also is there areas where they're more distinct?
Very good. And like, how did you end up in this field of work, right? Because again, it's a let's say relatively new job, right? So what was your background before working in customer success?
Certainly. So I actually started my career in the support side of things. So as a linguist, a graduate, so I did French and German at university. I was hired as a customer support agent in English, French, and German. And I got promoted then into the sales team of that organization as well, where I was effectively a customer success manager. They called it various different titles at the time. So there was a account development executive was one of the titles that was attributed to it at the time. So in many ways, what that gave me was actually a little bit of a flavor of both sides of the coin, where you had the supportive side, but also the strategic business side, and bringing those two together was how I ended up doing a lot of the function of customer success, even though it was customer success in all but name at that time. And then fast forward, only 4 years was when customer success as a title came about. I think when certainly in the UK markets where I was working as well. So that was really the origins of it as well, and how that there was that crossover between doing support and success, support and sales, as it were, and from that sort of grew into a customer success role, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Yeah, and that's a bit the case also that I mentioned, right, about my friend. She was also in customer support and then she became customer success. But, like it seems like customer success, and you mentioned that, in the way your job title was approached, right? There was strategic account management and so on. And I do see some similarities actually in what we would call like more traditionally strategic account management and customer success, right? So in what way are they different, if they are, or is customer success just another way to call that?
Yeah, so this is the interesting debate, because often what I tend to find in my experience is that you'll do a lot of the traditional customer success activities of trying to develop an existing relationship, bringing value to that particular customer, and making sure that they are in a position where they are ready to grow, as it were. What I find interesting as well is that you've got two schools of thought. One is that the growth of a particular customer should exclusively belong to sales, as it were, or in some cases what would be called business development, where
Mhm.
a customer success manager would bring in a salesperson to close the short-term deal. In my experience, though, I always wonder whether we could almost miss a trick a little bit in allowing customer success executives to actually develop their own business and actually be able to go out and sell, because often they are tied to sales organizations. I've, for one, had numerous rounds where I was part of a sales team and had sales training, but of course the responsibility of the sale goes to the account development executive or the account manager per se. So in many ways, it's up to organizations to and their discretion to how they want to manage it. But I think typically what you find is, obviously, you'll have dedicated sales teams who have individual comp plans versus customer success, who is more organizationally focused as well and work as a team. So in many ways, I think there's an open question in that sense about should we be almost keeping customer success within a certain parameter, particularly with the the crossovers that we're seeing, not just within CS and BD, but also within kind of the support sales, that operation that's becoming more and more integrated and particularly more and more complex. Should we be allowing more freedom, I guess, is a question, I think, to ask to customer success professionals.
Yeah, and that's a very good question to ask, right? Because it seems like, it is different from customer support because indeed customer support is really about, solving issues, right? When the customer has some and is very much reactive and so on. But then if customer success people are really supposed to be proactive and talking to customers and discovering more needs and trying to upsell, cross-sell, and so on, there seems to be, maybe there is a little bit of lack of training, especially because it looks like many people that work in customer success, they actually come from customer support. So they don't really have this commercial training or background, if we want, right? Really more sales-oriented. Is there a challenge in that sense? And if so, how would you fix that?
Well, most definitely, and this is part of the reason that that Agrea was set up. Actually, was because whilst there are organisations that do dedicated customer success certification and training, as it were, there isn't a kind of universal way of that, or universal recognised framework of what customer success is and does. You go to one organisation and it will be more support focused. You might have some teams, and this is the case where I have seen as well, where the customer success team will have one operative who is more focused on the technical implementation, one success operative who is focused purely on support, and one who will work as an account manager, as it were, across different accounts. One that will work with the renewals and commercial, others that might work across the feedback side of it. So this is part of the framework that we created as well within Agrea, is which we call SURF. So it focuses on 4 core competencies of success: support, use, return on investment, and feedback, which are the 4 elements that are key indicators and leading indicators, really, not just for the customers that are using the products and services, but also on the vendors that are providing them as well. Are they giving the right support? Are they giving the good means to use their products and services? Are they delivering return on investment and giving the feedback from that as well? So these are the kind of core things that I think are often missed because, like you say, there is a sort of if you like, a green field of what could be classed as customer success or what could be classed as business development in that sense. So that's where I think the challenge lies.
Very good. And talking a little bit more about Agrea, right? And what you do, and now you just explained us this framework, but how do you operate? And first of all, what type of clients do you work with? And then what do you do for them? Because you do both consultancy and training. Obviously, being from the BD school, I'm more interested on the training side, right? But tell us a little bit more about Agrea and how you operate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Agrea actually, in many ways, is a bit of a bit like the customer success organization, as it were. It's very much a greenfield in terms of who can access that kind of service as well, because customer success is obviously, it's typically and traditionally found within SaaS companies, but the customers of those are very much multi-sector. So I've worked with major financials, corporates, governmental organizations, some small and medium-sized businesses, and even some sort of small retailers as well, sort of far and wide as well, that all sort of been more remote reaches as well. So the idea of it is that the customer base is very, very broad, as a broad span, but the application can be more specific depending on the specific alignment that is required between customers and also between the actual vendors themselves. So that's one of the ways we operate, is that we recognize that it's actually important to have strategic alignment between customer, vendor, and also the third parties. So hence why we do an alignment sort of workshop and dedicated kind of follow-up services, and sort of a consultancy based approach as well, where we come in and we act as a dedicated partner to build a customer from just a sole customer to a partnership, and then obviously training around that as well, which is actually seeks to recognize and identify where we've come from, and this is part of the Agrea Train course as well. So where you have the transactional relationships we talked about, how we've evolved to a point where we need to actually have some sort of unified framework around customer success and business development internally as well. So that's where it comes from.
Perfect. And how does your training work? So is it really customized to the company, or is there, let's say, an off-the-shelf course that people could take to learn more about customer success? How does that work?
Yes, certainly. So there's an off-the-shelf course that is the entry point, as it were. So to enable people to ascertain, firstly, the understanding of where we've come from and where we're going, and then the training of the initial framework. But then that can then be brought out and scaled up to organizations that want to have wider training for their groups. Then this can be then fed into a broader alignment service, where customers can look at their strategic relationships across their customer bases and understand where there's strength and where there's potential opportunity, and then building that up into a consultancy service. So it's a tiered approach, as it were, right down from end user, who can sort of get a little bit of an insight into what it's like to do customer success and how to apply the rationale behind customer success, and then build it up into something more tangible as well.
Perfect. And, if I think a little bit more about the relation between business development and customer success, right? So obviously there are a few things that I think kind of overlap a little bit. I'm thinking specifically, for example, if you're a business development pro in a small company, and then you are the only business development pro, or you're the founder, well, obviously you're going to be working on the entire workflow, right? Which means really from generating awareness up to really building relationships and maybe upselling, cross-selling, and so on. So what is really this relationship between business development and customer success in a bit of a bigger company, right? Where actually there is more of a split of responsibility, and, everybody's doing their little part. How do they collaborate together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think really what we advocate as well is that it's got to be they've got to be kind of unified in terms of what frameworks you're working towards as well. So ultimately, customer success can be seen as and business development. They're not just roles, but there can also be philosophies as well. So when you're when you're talking in a bigger company as well, you have to decide as a company, is this a job, a philosophy, or a role that I'm applying for those? And it can be all of the above as well. So and when there's business development and customer success working together, you'll find that there is business growth. That's the ultimate goal, ultimately. So I think within a large organization, firstly, you have to define whether there is that that segmentation between philosophy, role, and job. Apply those jobs and roles then within the organization. But then if you have a unified framework in which BD and customer success can work towards for the benefit of that particular customer, that's all group of customers or industry sector, then from that, then what you can see is more tangible results and more long-term results. And I think this is what's key to note, is that it's about putting in strategic long-term measures that can help with the growth ultimately in the long run. So I think also and then the key thing there as well that I touched upon as well is, do you want to silo these different functions that ultimately are trying to achieve the same thing, or is there a way to cross them over? Does the job title of it, as it were, of customer success and BD, have opportunities for crossover, as it were? So one of the things that previously I've looked at as well is the idea of vendor customer ecosystem management as well. Like somebody who's overseeing not just the customer to vendor relationship, but the whole system in which it operates. And so does everyone feed into that sort of system? I also wrote an article entitled "The Chameleon Job," and it touches on some recent discourse as well around how customer success may, in some courses, is having almost a shelf life, as it were, in terms of its function, and whether it's the modernization needs to shift on that. So I think really the organizations need to be cognizant that yes, there is still a place for these separated and distinct roles, but they have to be mindful that as time progresses, there's going to be more and more crossover, and so more scope for them to marry up those roles as well, which will ultimately lead to increased efficiency within those organizations.
And customer success, is it just a role, for tech companies, specifically SaaS? Because that's pretty much the use case I know. And that's also like the first time I heard about customer success, it was really in that environment. So is it really prerogative just for tech companies, or do you think every company should have a customer success manager, at the very least one?
Well, I think in many ways, you could apply customer success to many principles and sectors as well. I would go even further to say that the principles around customer success you could apply to other sectors as well. So could you have, let's say in a public sector domain, could you have public success management where somebody oversees the implementation of public services very in an effective way, using some of the principles of customer success? So there is a very much, and again, this is where I think actually there is a bit of a ubiquity around customer success that has come about. The other thing I would also caveat as well is that in response to customer success, one of the things we were also seeing is vendor success management. So the management of customer success the other way, whereby vendors can so easily chop and change between service providers, not just from the perspective of SaaS companies, but also from the other kind of IT solutions in particular. But they look at that and they say, well, what's the value that I'm getting back from that, and what can I do to manage that? So in many ways, what's happened is that you have customer success management is being vendor success manager, and vendor success manager is being customer success manager, and you have this sort of ping pong effect that comes into play. So in answer to come back to your question about whether everywhere could have customer success, yes. Should they is very much up for debate. And I think the discourse, it suggests that given that some organizations are talking about moving away or evolving away from customer success, it seems unlikely that that's going to happen. But there's something that says to me it could happen, but in a different guise going forward.
And that's interesting. I didn't hear, well, obviously, I'm not really that much into customer success. I do have a lot of friends actually that work on it. They're part of communities and so on. Obviously, I know you, but I'm not really that much into this field. So what's the story that, some companies want to get rid of it in favor of what, if they get rid of customer success?
Absolutely. So in the turn of the year, there was a debate online, and you can look it up by Maple, and it had the founder of Gainsight, Nick Mehta, was one of the participants there, and he was on there debating about whether customer success has had its time, as it were. So there was a for and against debate that we're seeing that in many ways, what's probably happened in some respects is the application of customer success has been typically looked at through the prism of metrics and looking at key performance indicators, whether a customer has a health score, an NPS score of an 8 or a 10, or if it looks green. And then questions are then asked, why is it that a customer who has an NPS score of 10 or a 9 or 8 is still churning? Well, it's got nothing to do with the budget that particular customer has. The analogy I like to use about that, being a bit of a sports fan, is it's a bit like, let's say your team is going for the trophy. They win all their matches, but so does their rival, but that rival scores one more goal or one more basket, let's just say. So there's no guarantee of winning or gaining success in that regard. So that's why I think it's become such a competitive field to deal with, really.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm gonna check it out. I'm always up for some good gossip and polemics online, so I'm gonna look for that. But moving on a bit on another topic, which obviously is, I mean, it has an impact on every aspect of our lives, professional or not, and it's obviously AI. So how do you see AI impacting customer success? How it is changing this field as of today?
The impact is massive, and I think, like many sectors, the purpose of AI, I think, is going to lead to higher degrees of automation for a lot of the manual processes that often used to traditionally take up a lot of the customer success resource. So that would probably involve some of the initial handover as well. So in terms of onboarding customers, and so there's obviously a degree of automation that already exists in terms of video content and automating the onboarding process and sending sort of informed information to that. But I think also when you look at one of the key roles that customer success is supposed to do is which to ascertain value by conducting business reviews that can be on a quarterly, a monthly, or sort of in-person basis. I think there will be more automation that will take over that as well, whereby the QBR, if you like, becomes almost an automated bulletin, as it were, that it gets sent to these and then discussed at length, rather than a kind of formalized meeting where everything is looked at retrospectively. So in many ways, I think it has huge potential to make the role more proactive than it already is, and certainly replace some of the elements to it. But obviously there's a long way to go before it's replacing some of the CRM systems that are vital really for understanding where the customers are. Because let's not forget, it's one thing to have the CRM systems that sometimes will have all the data, sometimes won't. But I think in many ways we need to wait and see what happens in terms of how the CRM systems and the AI speak to each other. More mature that becomes, I think, will be a real determinant of where we go as a function.
Very interesting. Yeah, and because, well, obviously you mentioned, right, onboarding as probably like there was a lot of potential, right, to automate that and make it a little bit smoother as a process, right? Because I remember when I was working in this SaaS company, it was always a little bit of an issue, like you had this client and then it was like, okay, but when do we pass it over? After they sign the contract, or should they go earlier? And then are we sure that the customer success manager is talking to them? And, and then they always have these problems and there's a back and forth, So I do think that definitely AI can solve like some of these issues. But really, if we look at let's say the top two responsibilities of customer success managers, how do you see AI working together with the CS managers on these top 3, top 5 responsibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, like I say, I think there will be higher automation in terms of being able to better understand the data points of a particular customer. Because I think one of the things that we haven't necessarily cracked, but in some respects we have, is this idea that more usage, for example, of a SaaS product might lead to higher chances of renewal, and it doesn't necessarily have that into play. So I think where the AI can come in and help is actually bring in that broader picture, as it were. So bringing in, for example, wider media sources, or financial results within the metrics of the individual use of that particular customer, or that particular product or service as well. So I think there is an element where it can broaden the scope a little bit of what that capability is. I think also when we talk about kind of the sort of generating more value, I think, which is one of the key pieces, AI can certainly help to alleviate the workload of a customer success professional, to enable them to focus more strategically on those particular accounts, rather than be bogged down in sort of general admin tasks. But obviously that's going to evolve as well. So I think in many ways there's potential for an AI capability that can give predictive analysis about whether its customer will or won't renew, and whether it's worth pursuing a certain strategic angle, who to contact, as it were, as well. So this is the other thing. And then if you take it from the vendor's perspective as well, I talked about how they are also vendor success managing in well, what's to stop them applying the similar principle, whereby they are saying, they could even do it today, where they could go into an AI bot and say, tell me the top 10 providers of this particular service that I'm most interested in. Tell me why this one has the benefit of ease of use. Why has this one got better support, and all of those kind of things as well. So really it's about not just embracing the AI technology, but very, very much you have to be mindful that the vendors will cotton on to this as well, and will leverage more and more of the AI capability themselves to be able to deliver better implementations as well from their perspective.
Yeah, very good. And actually, you touched upon a topic which I think it's super relevant for business developers as well, which is really how do you prioritize customers, right? And I think it's in particular about those business development pros, that work in smaller companies, so they're actually responsible for the entire workflow, no? And sometimes it's really difficult to balance, looking for new business, working with partners, and, doing 10,000 other things. And of course, also follow up with your customers, make sure that you are in touch with them, and so on. Now, when I think about it, and my advice for students is always to obviously focus on the bigger clients and the ones, with the highest potential, let's say. But sometimes it's not the right strategy either, right? So how do you, maybe you have some tips, based on your experience, on how to prioritize customer communication, basically. So how often should you contact them, for example, if you want them to renew, just as an example?
Yes, that's right. I think it's it's kind of like, if you will, it's almost like a bit of $1 million question in some organizations. This idea of high touch versus low touch, and some people it's often typically the case where you find the high touch customers will want to be low touch, and the low touch customers will want a bit more care and attention, as it well. So I think in many practices you have to apply best judgment in terms of what the need payoff is between the investment of time. And I think this is one of the things that is really crucial, actually, is balancing the investment of time given to a specific customer versus the amount of time you have to build that relationship. So I think one of the key metrics that's often overlooked is not just the metrics of, are the customer using it, or are they happy, or they support it. It's how much time they've got left in the relationship. So if you've got a customer that is low touch, but they've got 2 months left to run of their contract, and you don't know whether they're going to continue business with you, I would say they are higher priority in many cases than the highest value contract that you might have that's got 2 years left to run. So you've still got 2 years of runway to do that. So this is why as part of the framework that we adopt as well, is the return on investment as well, and looking at so how long have you got within that time frame to deliver that return on investment that can bring more tangible results. And I think obviously then when you prioritize it in that way, you you then can have a plan, as it were, and you almost have a diary, and you can even bring in some AI take capability to that as well if you want,
Hmm.
where you're almost diarising the interactions you have with a particular customer, where you can say, right, this high touch customer, I'm going to speak with them on a weekly basis for the first 3 months of their relationship, and then I'm going to breach this to 2 weeks and then bring it as a on demand to just make sure that they're okay. And sometimes they become self-sufficient, because the ultimate
Hmm.
goal, I think, is to what matters as true customer success is if the customer is successful without your input, almost that you feel that's when you know you've done your job to the best capability. And if you go over and above that, then fantastic. But obviously, you have to be careful not to, as it were, pester certain customers, for want of a better word, because then they might see through that as, okay, they're pestering me because they want more business or more
Hmm.
from me, and so you have to be cognizant of that. That, like I say, there is also vendor success management that goes the other way from customer success management as well.
Very interesting. And well, I have to say I'm very happy because all our guests, they're very talkative, and I could have like 10,000 questions as well. But I noticed we're almost on the 1 hour mark. So that's good. Of course, for those of you listening, if you want us to keep talking more, just let us know in the comments, and then we get Jonathan back again. But just, to finish on a nice note, what do you think are the top 3 things that business development pros can copy from customer success managers and vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, like we touched upon, I think, in many respects, there is almost no distinction, I think, between the goal of business developers and customer success to develop and build relationships that are long-term and strategic and ultimately lead to more business. So in many ways, I think if you are a dedicated BD professional or a dedicated customer success professional, I would actively encourage you to speak to each other about what synergies you have within your role. It's a huge development opportunity for both sides as well, to be able to understand where one can develop understanding of maybe more traditional closing techniques, or perhaps more kind of strategic relationship building techniques and prioritization. So I think absolutely, see yourself almost as two sides of the same coin in some respects, or
Mhm.
maybe even, one side of the coin. It's as I say, there is very much the opportunity to grow from there. But I think also recognizing as well that you you also, and I say when I say you, BD and customer success, you all play a part in one organization's success, and also so be mindful of that, and actually advocate and champion that. Your mutual success will lead to your growth and your business success. So that's a really strong, powerful case to take to leadership, to be able to, not just develop your career, but also to develop the relationships you have with your customers. And also, and the final tip I would also say as well, in the kind of the automation say, is both of you go and see your customers and go to collaborate and go together, as it were. So because then you both can get the insights that you both need, and you both do your jobs really effectively. And I think only growth can come from that, really.
Great. Jonathan, thank you so much. Personally, I learned a lot, and I'm sure that also our listeners feel the same. Now, obviously, our mission at the BD School is to help more people get into business development. But maybe after this conversation, some people want to give a try to customer success. So let's say if someone wants to learn more and wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. So they can go to www.agreacs.com, and they can fill in the train form as well. So they can sign up to Agrea Train to get a taster or a flavor of customer success practice in terms of, and this looks at the traditional kind of pathway from the transactional relationships to the world that we live in today, and how you can navigate that process. And then if you're wanting sort of further advice, I also offer dedicated training services as well for those who are looking for coaching or mentoring within the customer success domain as well. And obviously be happy to refer those in as well to looking to cross over into the BD sector as well, because I think ultimately, like I say, mutual success is key. So I think ultimately, feel free to go and do that as well.
Absolutely. So for those of you who want to switch from CS to business development, do check out the BD School for our business development certification program. Jonathan, thank you so much. This was fun. And well, as mentioned, I hope to have you again in one of our conversations or maybe on a webinar. So very happy to do that. Thank you so much again. Well, I'll see you soon. Everybody listening, thank you so much for staying with us until the end. And of course, next week we'll be back with a new episode. So just make sure to subscribe and activate the notifications so you won't miss any of our future episodes. Everyone, thank you so much. Bye, Jonathan.
Thank you, Lucia. Bye-bye.
Subscribe and listen to more episodes of Let's Talk BD podcast.